Sometimes when I get involved into a specific project from an investor's perspective, of course, and I'm talking about real DeFi stuff, I tend to go on YouTube or Twitter and check for presence, exposure. And surprisingly, metronome.io doesn't have practically any YouTube exposure. So aside from their native YouTube channel, which used to post, I'm not sure if they still do, there's practically nothing out there. And that's a shame, because the model that they have created is interesting, rewarding, and promising. So metronome.io defines itself as synthesizing the future of DeFi. Now, a synthetic asset, just by definition, just to start things off by something that gives you a clear explanation of what they mean, is technically, in crypto terms, a tokenized derivative. Now, in general, it is a financial derivative because there is this main asset out there, and then you can create versions of it to use elsewhere. So in this case, assuming that there is Bitcoin, a protocol can come in and synthesize it and create XBTC, for example, that can be used to leverage yield elsewhere. So their core process, or the core status of Metronome, revolves around synthesizing main core assets. So here is a rundown of the model. Now, traditionally, you know very well in terms of lending and borrowing that in order to borrow a certain asset, you have to deposit collateral. All right, so you have assumingly deposited BTC, and then you borrow, let's say, USDC. You use that USDC to do whatever you want, but then you have to repay the loan with interest, or forfeit your collateral, or get liquidated if the ratio that you put in drops below that price point. So Metronome does things a bit differently, all right? So it does follow the original idea of depositing a collateral. So they have a list of collateral. For example, you have wrapped Bitcoin, you have DAI, you have USDC, you have ETH, etc. But they also add something that they call productive collateral. So productive collateral are also assets that are as well synthetics, by the way, and they are yield bearing by nature. So for example, they have, I think, two assets. One is VA ETH and one is VA USDC that you can use as collateral, by the way. And as an asset by itself, it also produces yield on top versus also whatever you get. So it's an additional layer of revenue for the user or the third party using that form of collateral. So moving on, you deposit your collateral, and then instead of borrowing any type of asset on the market, you mint a synthetic version of whatever they have in store. So right now they have a version of ETH called MSETH, a version of Bitcoin called MSBTC, and a version of USDC called MSUSD. So you deposit collateral, you mint a synthetic version of these assets, and then you can use these assets to yield farm, to swap with zero price impact, so on and so forth. So that is the core concept of their model. So it has the initial idea, but it's a bit different in terms of outreach and in terms of outcome. Now, unfortunately, there are so many things to cover in this protocol. So I cannot do everything in one video. I mean, I can, but then it would be boring because it will be very lengthy. So I decided to basically cover the overview and cover what is the model about. Now, all of this is controlled by a treasury that has both the native assets. So they do have a native asset called MET, and it does have ETH. Now, the treasury basically funds development, provides liquidity. For example, they are now present on Ethereum and Optimism. So Ethereum has most of the liquidity, 2.4 million right now, a bit less, I think. And Optimism has about around Optimism has about 60, 70K, around that in terms of liquidity. It's quite new, it's brand new, that's why it doesn't have much, all right? Now, not only that, but the treasury would also support synthetic protocol own liquidity. So it does also help in providing liquidity for its synthetic pairs and incentivizing third parties to do so. Specifically, for example, on V33 exchanges such as Velodrome, on Optimism, where if you provide liquidity for the synthetic ETH pair of Metronome, you earn rewards in Velo. So that is one of the concepts. And at the same time, it is fed. So where's the money coming from? Mainly from protocol fees, which we're going to be discussing soon, and as well as liquidations. Because remember, you deposit collateral, meaning you have a ratio. So if it drops below, you get liquidated. So that is how the Treasury controls the metronome protocol overall. All right. So with that in mind, I just want to reference some technicalities that are related to the core concept of that DeFi protocol. One, we discussed about that the Treasury is fed from protocol fees. So what am I talking about here? First, there are marketplace fees, because once you mint a synthetic version of ETH, let's say MS ETH, you can exchange it for, let's say, MFUSD or MSBTC, but then there's a 1% max fee that will be occurred. Now, the white paper surprisingly states that it's 0.25%, but on their website, means on the DApp, it's 1%. So I guess it's somewhere in between. So that's one. There's also the liquidation part, which a higher percentage of that will also feed the Treasury. There is also a mint fee. For example, once you deposit your collateral and mint those synthetic assets, there is a fee that is occurred as well on top of this. And there is something that is called a synth balance fee. Now, the synth balance fee is something that comes in on a per second basis, but is accrued annually at the end of the day. Meaning, because you own that synthetic asset, you have to pay a certain, let's call it a certain yearly interest for owning it. And that percentage is not quite substantial. So on a yearly basis, about 1%. So 1% APR. So it's kind of negligible if you're utilizing those assets to generate substantial yield. All right. Now, yield generation, all of this will be covered later. That's not the purpose of this video. So circling back to the MET token itself. So the MET token has 3 uses as per the white paper, and some of them aren't actually in play right now. So it is a governance token, so that is currently happening. I think that's the main purpose of its usage. So you stake it, there's a time frame, you get to vote on decisions. Similarly, you get trading discounts on the marketplace, as well as when you mint the synthetic versions of the assets. So it helps. If you're a big boy, then it would affect you. All right, so here's the difference. You have to understand how this works. Now, there is one more use here, and that is MET used as collateral, but I don't think that's possible now. By the looks of it, when I looked on the app, I didn't see it in the collateral list, so I don't think it's there now, but they say it's in the white paper, so most probably it's coming, okay? And at the end of it all, understanding the model, understanding how they make money, understanding the native assets, again, yield generation aside, that's coming later, there are also risks. Risks are part of the game. Risks are everywhere in any type of protocol, whereas it's security risk or other types of risks. Now, in general, when it comes to DeFi protocols and DeFi protocols like this one, you have the liquidation risk that's inherent, goes without saying. If you deposit the collateral, you are at risk of getting that collateral liquidated if you mess up, right? That's quite obvious. There's also the idea of having a black swan event that would cause liquidation, and a cascading liquidation at that. So if something were to happen where the price of ETH or BTC drops by a very big amount, you could end up having a very bad situation in terms of getting your deposit liquidated and having to forfeit whatever you have. So yeah, and there's also the idea of oracles that could disrupt the price tags of these synthetic version of the assets and the main assets themselves, which could also slip these assets below peg and cause liquidation. So it all rolls back again to the liquidation part. So that is what you need to know in general, right? But When you mint an asset, remember there's collateral. So there's backup, meaning from that perspective, it's there. The backup is there. It's all about price action and understanding how you can forfeit your collateral if something like this were to happen. And I think I'm gonna add the video here, all right? So one more thing I'm gonna add is that I'll leave the link to the website. The white paper has everything in check. The next video will most probably cover the smart farming aspect of metronome, which is quite interesting because it also involves other players. So that is an interesting part of it, which will be covered later, like I said. And go on the app and explore how the app works overall. So just check, because it's very simple, it's very straightforward. There's nothing much to really go over. As you can see, you have the collateral list here, and this is what you mint as a synthetic version of the main assets, so on and so forth. All right. One more thing I'm going to add at the end of this is that if you're not part of our community, DeFi Ascension, consider joining. It's quite an interesting group of people, like-minded investors and individuals. You're going to have some fun. All right. We'll see you there, hopefully. And with that, see you in the next one. Have a good one.